What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another top 5 list, man. Oh, I am pumped to be back with a video like this. We have not done a top 5 rank list in a minute, and this is one of those topics that we can continue to cover over and over and over as the offseason continues. However, it also is the perfect opportunity to kind of lay the foundation for the offseason talk, to really discuss multiple positional groups currently for the Lions, and this is our top 5 needs heading into the offseason. So let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, man, we are back with another top 5 video. I'm pumped up for this one. I love doing this topic. On one hand, I love it, and I understand that this thing is going to change and that we could do multiple videos like this. We could do another one before free agency. Players start to get cut. You start to re-sign guys. You can update it like, hey, updated top 5 needs. We're 3 days into free agency. You could do it before the draft, top 5 needs for the draft. Like, this is a topic that can be updated at the trade deadline right before the season. So there's probably going to be multiple videos of this. In my opinion, it probably will change because roster moves will also change. However, it is the perfect opportunity to just talk about some specific positional groups that I would like to see the Lions address. Now, what I hate about this topic is the flip side, because it feels like it's kind of impossible to answer some of how you would actually rank this list. In terms of this, if I was just going based on what the Lions have and they don't have, I could legitimately sit up here and objectively say fullback is number 1, kicker is number 2, long snapper is number 3. And you would think, what the heck am I watching? But I could do that. If you don't have anybody under contract, that makes sense that that's a big need. But I'm not going to do that because I'm also going to throw kind of the logic side into this as well and take into account exclusive rights free agent. Like, okay, he's probably going to be brought back. Why would he not? But I also have to keep in mind who is set to become a free agent, because unrestricted free agents for the Lions, guys that could definitely leave this offseason, that does play a major role in what is our needs because they're not on the roster right now. For example, Josh Reynolds. As much as I want to say, like, okay, Josh Reynolds, he'll probably come back. However, we don't know that. So if Josh Reynolds doesn't come back, then we don't have Josh Reynolds. And there's a chance that he does not come back in free agency. We've seen that. And if that is the case, now it becomes a much bigger need for the Lions. So that's the difficulty with this. So I have to take into account, but at the same time, I'm not going to go overboard with taking into account who is actually on the roster at this point in time. And I also want to make this clear. Just because my top 5 looks a certain way, say, whatever positional group is at 1 and whatever's at 5, doesn't mean that I'm saying in the draft, oh, you got to take number 1 first. Like, that's not what I'm saying, okay? That's not how you should approach the draft. That's not how the Lions will approach the draft. That's not what I'm saying. Same thing for free agency. Just because that number 1 is not saying that's got to be the biggest deal, that's got to be the most expensive or the longest deal. No, that's not what I'm saying, okay? Heck, number 1 honestly could be one of your cheaper deals on this list. But, and some of that's just positional value. Some positions you got to spend more than others. But to me, it's like, hey, that's a need. And a big part of that for me is looking at, like, okay, if the Lions were to bring back everybody that they had last year at this position, is it still a need? If the answer is yes, it's probably pretty high on this list. So with that being said, we're only doing a top 5, so of course there's a lot of positional groups that are left off of this list, but we'll go one by one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Absolutely feel free to disagree, because I know most people will, and that's absolutely fine. My opinion probably will change on this as well, so let's get into it. Let's start off at number 5. Now, I cheated.
Because you cheated?
I mean, look, we could call this an honorable mention, but I kind of pointed it out like at the beginning, but it's a need. The issue I have is addressing this positional group as a need. That's kind of the issue that I have with ranking this, but I'm going to say honorable mention is kicker. Okay, because even if the Lions were to bring back the kickers that they had last year, Michael Badgley, Riley Patterson, it would still be a need to me to go add another kicker. Now, that, again, doesn't mean that would have to be a legitimately high draft pick. Doesn't have to be a massive free agent signing or a trade. But the Lions, to me, should add more competition to that room. I just don't want to put that in the top 5 list, but it's absolutely a need as a kicker position. Now, I expect that they'll probably bring some of those guys back, but that's a need. That is a need to address that position, add more competition. As always, the kicker position fluctuates so much, it's really difficult. But for the Lions, maybe a guy with a little bit more of a leg, maybe a guy that's a little more accurate. I mean, look, that's a perfect world. But I'm going to throw that in here just as an honorable mention. So now let's get into the actual top 5. Starting at number 5, we have the defensive end position. Now, I want to clarify what I mean by the defensive end position. I'm talking about Josh Paschal, John Kaminsky, Aiden Hutchinson, adding to the defensive end position. Now, here's the reason that it's so low on this list. The reason it's so low for me is because I do believe that the Lions believe that they may have the answers to some of the questions here currently on the roster. Now, there is some questions about John Kaminsky and where his contract is going next season, just by the way that the Lions laid it out when they gave him his extension. Obviously, this past season wasn't his best season as a pass rusher, but he was still an efficient run defender. Nothing really changed drastically there on Kaminsky, outside of the fact that we just started to see a lot more Josh Paschal this past season. Now, the reason it is on this list is a positional group that's very key for the Lions because depending on the front that they go into, these guys move around all the time. They have to deal with tight ends, they deal with the strong side of the formation, or they're kicking inside the tackle box when the Lions want to roll down a Derek Barnes to the line of scrimmage. So these guys are moving around a ton. They have to play in space, or they also have to deal with multiple blocks. This is a very important position, stopping the run and rushing the passer. And for the Lions at the spot, because they also are the guys that a lot of times will kick into the interior on third down in obvious pass rush down situations, the reason it's on here is because opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, I do think the Lions still want to get a lot more production than what they've gotten. Paschal, we've seen him take a lot more snaps this past year. He had 13 total pressures according to PFF on the season. That is nowhere near enough. He was not a great pass rusher. Now, part of that is kind of understandable because at Kentucky, he was not a great pass rusher against offensive tackles. Like, that's not where he won. He has some bull rush capabilities. He can keep you in the pocket, but that's not necessarily where he won, was the outside pass rush wins. It was his ability to step inside, bull rush, act like a bowling ball, knock guys back to the pocket. And then John Kaminsky, obviously all the stunt work that he's able to do, the games that he runs up front, the flexibility that he adds there. And as a run defender, Josh Paschal was pretty good, which again was another expected thing coming out of Kentucky. But I still think they definitely want to get more growth out of that position. We saw them add defensive line coach from the Tennessee Titans, so I think partially they're hoping that he can help with some of that development there as well. I don't expect John Kaminsky to be gone, but there is a potential to actually cut John Kaminsky. I don't really expect it to take place, and I think it'd be great to keep both guys around, even if you added to this position. But I do think this is one of those spots where they do feel like they just need more production opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. But I'm putting it at number 5. This nearly did not make the list because I wouldn't have an issue if the Lions said, no, Josh Paschal, he was a second-round pick. Like, that gets forgotten, and I think what Brad Holmes laid out this year is like, hey, you don't grade drafts, even though I will because it's fun. But he's right. You don't grade drafts the year after. You grade them 3 years after. And, you know, for first-round picks, you may get that immediate production. You may get that immediate impact. But once you get beyond first round, you don't really expect that in year one. And the Lions have hit on that in a lot of positions, which has shot them ahead so fast, in my opinion. But guys like Josh Paschal, you know, the time that he's missed with injury, if he can just get on the field consistently, I think the Lions are looking at him and saying, man, this is going to be a really good player for us. He just needs to be out there consistently. We just need a little bit of growth and development within his game, but he's going to be a really good player for us. Even some of the plays that he made in space this past year were impressive. I'm a big fan of Josh Paschal. I like him a lot. For the Lions here, they could absolutely be looking at this position saying, look, we have the answers on the roster. We don't need to go out of house and make massive additions. However, there's the flip side of me, which it was like, okay, but if you were sitting there and, I don't know, a guy like Darius Robinson from Missouri was sitting there and he was available, would I hate that addition? No. I think that would be an amazing addition to pair along with Aiden Hutchinson and Josh Paschal. Then maybe you bring up scenarios of moving off of John Kaminsky. We'll see if they do or not. Even if they don't, it's like, yo, that's a nasty rotation that you have there, and that's a strong defensive front, tons of flexibility. Throughout this video, and you'll see it continuing forward, I throw some prospects out there. I just throw some names of potential draft picks for the Lions. It is officially draft season. I understand free agency comes first, man, but I'm a big draft guy, and in the background, that has been my focus right now, is going through just a ton of different draft prospects. That way, when we start to get to these mock off seasons, which is going to be happening very soon, so stay tuned for that, as well as the NFL scouting combine and all of those things that we're going to talk about for the draft. That way, I have some information I can share with you. But because it is that time, I am absolutely loving this. And if you use that top link in the description, on your first 3 deposits, you can get a 125% match. 125% match on your first 3 deposits using code JOIN125. So click that top link in the description. And as you can see here, we're over here on BetUS, the website. And of course, they have different options: casino games, live betting, racebook. I know basketball, All-Star Weekend this weekend. That was a crazy Saturday. I mean, the dunk contest is usually like, okay, this is not great. You know, this isn't good. But the 3-point contest is a thing now. So that was interesting. However, it feels like football season to me. It still does. BetUS right now, you can place some bets for the NFL draft. And actually what I love about this, which I just want to showcase here, is how to bet on NFL draft 2024 odds. They actually break down what you should do to bet on this, like what you should know, looking into mock drafts. Like, they break it down for you. So I love this explanation by BetUS. But as you can see, the options that they have available right now. Who's the first overall pick? Now, by far, Caleb Williams is the favorite. But, man, I've heard Drake May. I've heard the name. So if you believe it's a possibility, that might be the shot. Or if you're like, for sure, it's Caleb Williams, maybe you just go with Caleb Williams. But they also have other options like this, for example. First, a non-quarterback selected. Now, again, Marvin Harrison Jr., heavy favorite for this. But who's outside of Marvin Harrison Jr., you got a lot of nice odds to look at here. Joe Alt would be next up, the offensive tackle, but there's a lot of names that are kind of in the like, okay, no one's expecting anybody else to go before Marvin Harrison Jr. So again, that could be an opportunity to either say, hey, look, I'm jumping on that. We know it's going to be Marvin Harrison. That's easy money, but it could also be an opportunity to make some good money when it's not Marvin Harrison Jr. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So again, click that top link. First 3 deposits, you get a 125% match. Code JOIN125. All right. Let's get back to the... So that's one of those positions where I definitely feel like the Lions can still look to upgrade, but there's also the flip side where if they don't make major additions to it, I could also understand feeling like, hey, we have the answer on this roster. We just need more playing time, more snaps, more development from that player. And I would completely understand that. He was in year 2 last year, and he missed a lot of time, so it's understandable where he's at right now, and I think they're hoping that he's going to continue to take steps. But that's why that's at number 5. That was a tricky one. Really, that one, and honestly, receiver were kind of the two that I went back and forth with there, because Josh Reynolds is an unrestricted free agent. That's the other one that I kind of bounced back and forth with. Outside of Josh Reynolds, I love the receiver room. Khalif Raymond, which just getting him back will be huge, because when we lost Khalif Raymond, that's where we started to see Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's one of the unrestricted free agents, and he kind of picked up in some of that level 1 role underneath. It was like, okay, he's able to pick up, win some one-on-ones, win on quick slants, which was necessary. We needed that big physical body type that could fit into this offensive scheme, which is so many in-breaking routes. But even outside of that, Jameson Williams, the development that he took. Obviously, the route tree, how it kind of fit into what Goff does well. Obviously, he's a third-level deep threat, but then there was also the level 1 impact that he began to make, and it was like, okay, now J-Mo's getting expanded. His role is getting expanded. And we saw in the San Fran game, most snaps in the postseason. It was also, I think, arguably his best game of the season. He didn't come up with the touchdown. There's areas that he needs to grow, like tracking the football to me is one of the biggest. But, man, you understand that there's things that he does well, other things that's not necessarily who he is. But he had a massive game, and the strong hands, the way that he developed from all the questions that he had in the preseason to where he ended the season in terms of, like, can he catch in traffic? The answer was an absolute yes, man. That guy showed a ton of toughness, and also the run blocking came along with it as well. So when you add that with St. Brown, who to me is a pure number 1,
I thought the nuance as a route runner for Jameson improved a ton, just timing, making himself a quarterback target. I'm showing a tight end here, James Mitchell blocking, because it's kind of my point to James. I don't think he's an elite route runner. I thought he was good for us. He was great in pass protection like this, but he's a guy where it's like, okay, he's not the best route runner, but I think Shane Zylster comes back exclusive rights free agent.
Pure number 1 receiver. Can play slot, can play outside, and he's going to get paid a lot of money. You still have Antoine Green, who is here. Obviously, the 2 tight end packages does affect this a little bit as well, because you're not consistently going out there 11 personnel. I need 3 receivers on the field. Having Khalif Raymond come back as well. I think you have a really nice 4 receiver room there. The Lions, of course, then have to make a decision on Josh Reynolds. So that would be the other one that's kind of close, is the receiver position, because to me, Josh Reynolds is not a great receiver. He's not your number 1 receiver. Again, to me, that's St. Brown, and he's about to get paid like it. But what he is, he's good. And he was number 3 in beating man coverage this season, over 50% of the time, man coverage win rate this past season. And he was one of those guys where if you're playing like an elite corner that just stays with Josh, you may not throw to him. However, a ton of teams don't have an elite corner. And if that is the case, he can be very impactful, very effective. He's super reliable. He just had 2 big-time drops in a very, very bad time. But he only had 3 on the season. So, like, I'm a big fan of Josh. I think, what he's done for Goff and the way that he's helped Goff has been massive. He fits in his offense so darn well. I like me some Josh Reynolds. I don't think he'll be super expensive this offseason. I'd love to get him back. I'd love to do it like potentially on like a 1-year deal, because then if I draft someone, I can still kind of make that kind of work. But it may be like a 2-year deal. Either way, I think Josh is probably going to get re-signed to Lions. I'd be a little surprised if he doesn't. However, if I did bring back Josh, and if I did the same thing, for example, the defensive end position, and I just said I'm bringing back everybody here, which is a little bit different because one's an unrestricted free agent. The other guys, Josh and John, who mainly hold that position down, and Hutch, you could throw into that mix. Those guys are already under contract. If you said all those guys came back, which position to me would then still be a bigger need, I would then point to defensive end. So that's really my reason here. I know it sounds weird, but y'all get what I'm saying. So defensive end, at number 5. At number 4, let's stay on the defensive line. Let's go to defensive tackle or nose tackle. Honestly, you can kind of point this however you want to, whatever wording you want to give there. Here's the reason I put it here. Again, kind of like number 5, in a way, I do think that the Lions hope that they have their answers on the roster, and I think in a lot of ways they kind of do. Aleem McNeil, to me, is one of those guys that's a no-brainer, should get an extension. All right, I'd love for it not to be incredibly expensive, like, hey, let's go pay him like Aaron Donald, like, not that, but the dude should absolutely get paid. He absolutely should get paid. Playing through injury, adjusting his body, finding a way to become a pass rush threat, improving there every single year, getting better in every aspect. Great run defender, flexible on the front. Like, that dude was a pure nose tackle that played a ton of 3 technique. That dude was so darn impressive this year. We all anticipated, like, that's going to be the breakout guy. And then he was, right? Like, he was so massive for us, and he really didn't have much of another interior presence in terms of pass rush. So he's a guy that absolutely should get paid. No brainer, in my opinion. He's one of the easiest decisions. Find a way to bring that guy back. However, it's then outside of that. And here's the thing. The Lions have Levi on the final year of his deal. And he showed us some stuff this past year. It's awesome. And I hope next year he's able to even build to that more. Like, hey, more snaps for Levi. Let's go, because it's the final year of your deal. This is your chance to show what you got, right? Last year was like, okay, we're back to it now. You showed some pass rush. You showed some flashes, some flashing against the run a little bit as well. It wasn't as good, but you showed some flashes there. Now it's like, let's put together a full season. Let's finish on a strong note. Let's see if we can bring you back. But outside of that, you just have a lot of like, okay, I don't really know. Whether that's Levi, Broderick Martin, very understandable where his development was. It's not a missed draft pick because a guy towards the end of the 3rd round in a nose tackle position that was very light by that time in the draft did not play a ton this year. That doesn't make it a miss. Again, back to what Brad Holmes said, you look at it 3 years down the road, and especially for where that draft board was at, I look back at I think I had him like in the high 5s range. So for me, like, okay, it's understandable. Like that's going to take some time. It would have been great for him to immediately come in and just be a dog year 1, but it's going to take some time there. And I think the Lions hope that, again, new defensive line coach, they're going to get big steps there, and they could have their answers on the roster. If Broderick is a dog in the interior, which with his length, his size, paired with Aleem McNeil, he's not a big time pass rusher, but obviously he won't be out there on 3rd downs, but he can get some effort wins. You got a really strong interior defensive line. But it's that question. It's really the Broderick Martin question, because now you have Isaiah Buggs, free agent. You let him go at the end of the season. Tyson Alualu, free agent. He's 37 years old. I can bring back Tyson Alualu, but one, I can't bring him back and be like, hey, you're the dude for the year. And on top of that, like, I don't think you want him to be the dude for the year. Okay, he's a fine pass rusher. He gives you a little bit there, but not nearly enough for me to make him the starter. Like, I don't feel that way at all. And then run defense, I don't think is that spectacular from Tyson Alualu either. So that's one of those positions where there's just too many questions for me not to have it here. Again, the Lions could have their answers on the roster, but this is one of those spots, especially when I look at free agency, I think there's a lot of options that you could dive into at free agency, whether that's the veteran route, right? If you want to go the veteran route, hey, let's try to go get Fletcher Cox from Philly, right? If you want to go that route, maybe you go with a bigger deal and you're like, for me, it's, hey, if you could get Grover Stewart over here, like, I would be on board with that. That dude's ability to handle double teams, his length in the inside, he could still get some pass rush wins, coming off maybe his best pass rushing season. Like, hey, you put that guy in the mix,
Now, let me be clear. These are two different types of players. You look at a guy like Grover Stewart, much more of a nose tackle, really good run defender, not as consistent as a pass rusher, kind of falls into his pass rush. Versus Fletcher Cox, who just moves all around. Pass rusher, probably not your pure nose tackle, but he's a really good pressure presence, probably more of a one-year deal. Two different types of players, but honestly, you could probably go either type of route. You could go, hey, we want more of the interior run defender, pair him with Aleem, or you can flip it and say, we'll just have Aleem play more nose tackle, we'll get the more pass rusher, tie him with Levi. That way we have a guy that we know is really good, as well as the young guys. I think you can go either way on this one.
DJ Reader, probably a bigger deal, probably not that far. Or maybe some of even the cheaper deals that potentially could come up at that spot. So to me, that's one of those spots where I think you have to have some addition. It doesn't have to necessarily be a rookie because of where you pick in the draft unless you trade up. You may not get an immediate starter there. I may just have not seen him yet. For me, this position feels like it's more of a free agent spot, but to me, this is also a spot where if you want to spend some big money, wouldn't have a problem with it. There's just too many questions for me to not put it as a need. I would love to have the answers on the roster. The Lions would as well. That's how they want to build, is through the draft. But there's nothing wrong with then adding a free agent and be like, okay, while we're seeing if that's going to happen, let's add a guy that's a little more proven, put him in the mix too, and then, okay, we'll let him develop alongside that guy. We'll rotate him in. I have no issue with that because then you can go on the older signing route as well. To me, that's number 4. And a big reason for this as well, last point that I'll make, again, Levi, I love me some of Lee McNeil. big reason for this as well is you see it in the red zone, right? If you look at the Lions' goal line or red zone defense, like, that wasn't great. Well, it's not on the run defense, but there was a good amount on the run defense. I understand the run defensive stats, right? Lions over the last year and a half have been incredible at stopping the run. A lot of that still is schematic through Aaron Glenn. It's bringing extra bodies. It's the slot blitzing. It's the slanting of defenders. And you give the interior credit. Even a Benito Jones, another free agent who did not have his best season. I was a guy that was like, yo, bring back Benito Jones after what I saw last season. Now I'm not really sure if they'll do it or not, but he's another guy could potentially be brought back on a very cheap deal, potentially come in to compete. But you see it in the red zone where the Lions really struggled, 30th in the league. And not all of it, but a portion of that was their inability to just stop the run on the interior when they got to those spots, because it's not as much about scheme. Everybody, if you're running the ball, everybody's blind. They put everybody on the line. So now it's like, yo, who's going to stop who? And if you can't get the stops there, it's like, all right, we may have some weaknesses at this spot. And to me, tie that along with the fact that we just don't get like any kind of pressure. We got like no pressure at all outside of Lee McNeil, outside of like some flashes from Levi because he didn't play that many snaps whatsoever. You need to add something there. So that's why it comes in at number 4. Into the top 3. At number 3, we have outside linebacker. That's right. I flipped these. I put outside linebacker at 3. And the biggest reason I ended up flipping these, because originally I had defensive tackle above outside linebacker, is because, like I said, I do think that the Lions could absolutely have their answers on the roster. They just may need a little bit of a stopgap. I don't know why I said it like that, to get there. Outside linebacker, again, I think you could argue the Lions potentially have the answers here. I just kind of have slightly more questions about this position, if that makes sense. Plus, I kind of also looked at it like this. If I was like going by these positions, we'll get to the next 2 here in a second, but like, could I get away with not having this or not having this? Like ordering it like that, I think you could get away with not having maybe the best interior defensive line upgrades versus outside linebacker upgrades. I think you could, and the reason that I think you could, even though you could get away with both, Lions led the league in pressure rate last season, I think you could because we saw it. Our run defense was still really darn good this past season. If you have a Lee McNeil healthy, and then on pass downs, you just bring other guys in. Even Pascal played some 3 technique, which is not natural. Same thing with Kaminsky. But I think you can kind of get away with that one in some ways. Outside linebacker, I think, just needs an upgrade. Now, with that being said, this is also a position where, again, I like what we have. And I know James Houston is an exclusive rights free agent. To me, he's going to be brought back. I'm just assuming he's going to be brought back for another season. So I'm just counting him as part of the roster. That's not why I put this here. Then I also look at Derek Barnes. Now, Barnes didn't consistently play this role, but we did see Barnes start to play this role, right? We saw it in some big games for the Lions. And it's not like he couldn't rush the passer. He wasn't great there. That's not necessarily his game. It's like, I'm going to go get that quarterback. But he wasn't terrible. He had some wins for what you'd expect from a Sam linebacker. It's like, okay, that's not bad. I can rock with that. And I thought he really improved the more and more he just played in that role. Kind of took him back seemingly to his Purdue days a little bit. Like, really improved, has the length, has all the measurables to kind of play that role in base downs. And then, of course, if you have James Houston healthy, he can go out there on pass rush downs. Maybe not even just base down. He could just go out there on pass rush downs. Like, that's not a bad 1-2. Barnes on the final year of his deal, 1-year deal for James. That's not bad. But it's also a position where I do think that even if they were both brought back, I could still have some questions about that spot just on a down-to-down basis. And I think for the Lions there, it's not that I don't think James can win, even though he didn't look great as a pass rusher, but he missed so much time that I'm not going to put too much of that against him with such a small sample size. He looked really good a year ago. I know there's limitations there, but that's mainly just body type, to be honest. This, for me, is a spot where I brought up Andrew Van Ginkel. We did the video on him. I think a guy like that would be an awesome addition to this mix because then I would get real consistency on first down, second down, third down. I'd get more coverage upside that I feel very comfortable with. I'd get an elite run defender. I'd have a really good pass rusher, not an elite pass rusher, right? Not a pure pass rusher, but a really good pass rusher. And then I can mix that with James Houston, kind of minimize some of the snaps, allow Barnes to continue to be rotational between off-ball and sandbacker with injuries. I don't know if the Lions want to make like that's his full-time role. Him and James are going to rotate there. They could, because they could say we have Jack Campbell, we have Alex Anzalone, we have Malcolm Rodriguez. We'll see what we do with Jalen, but if they bring him back, you can say, well, that's kind of his full-time role. We'll just let him rotate. So I can understand this being lower on the list, but for me there, I still think the Lions could absolutely use an upgrade at the spot just from an all-down responsibility aspect. I do think with James healthy, they're pretty fine. I'm not overreacting to the pass rushing side, to be honest, right? Most sandbackers aren't going to to be elite pass rushers that can also drop into coverage and play the run really well. But for me, it's just all the responsibilities in coverage, run defenses, everything else that goes into playing that position. And to me, it's also not one of the biggest positions either, meaning that with so many teams playing 11 personnel, you don't consistently even have this spot on the field. But to me, I'm still going to throw it in here as a need. And we saw last year without James, we just had to go through guys trying to find anybody that could give us some pass rush depth. And we had a lot of pass rush depth pieces. Julian Okwara, Charles Harris, kind of can throw Romeo into that mix if you want to. And we added some new ones, right? We just Betts, the CFL standout pass rusher. We just added some new pieces to that mix. But I'm going to put this thing at number 3. I understand the role isn't the biggest. I'm not saying this has to be your top draft pick. It could be, I guess. I'm not saying that it has to be. I think it could be a nice little free agent signing the Lions could add and just really improve this roster overall. But with that, I'm going to put it at number 3. All right, moving on to number 2. This one to me is interior offensive line. Now, this isn't saying replace Frank Ragnow. Don't replace Frank. Frank is awesome. He's playing next season. I'm glad we have Frank Ragnow. But it's pretty clearly the guard positions. Jonah Jackson, Graham Glasgow, both free agents. This has to be on the list. Now, the positive to this side is this. I do kind of think the Lions are going to re-sign both of these players. I think Graham Glasgow's likely a one-year deal. I kind of think maybe the $6-7 million range when you throw in the aspect that he also has the void year. So if you throw that on top of a $6 million deal, $7.4 million, that'd be his cap at this year. I think that's potentially possible. And then also a guy like Jonah Jackson, I think he's probably pushing closer to the $8 million per year, 2 to 3 years, maybe a 3-year, $8 million per year, maybe even a little bit more than that for Jonah Jackson just because of his age. And we don't see a ton of guys that are that young that hit the market consistently, so that'll be a big aspect is the age. The thing with Jonah is we know he's not an elite pass protector. Though he was better this season, he's not an elite pass protector. He's just good. He's just good at best in pass protection, but he is a very flexible athlete in terms of the run game. And this is where I really love this positional group for us, is because to me what makes this run game so threatening is one aspect is we are a very good zone rushing team. And when you look at the Lions personnel, whether that was adding Colby Sorstel last year or adding Graham Glasgow, when you added Jonah Jackson, these are zone rushing scheme fits coming out of college. Like, these guys can play zone rushing schemes. So the Lions lean into that more this past season. Meanwhile, you just back up a season, and it's a way heavier gap team. And you're like, all right, we're pulling offensive linemen left and right. This year, it's more zone rushing. And some of that could be the backs that you have between Montgomery and also Gibbs. But I think really what that is, it's the flexibility of the offensive line. They can go into a certain game and say, okay, we think they struggle with this. This is how we're going to attack them. This is going to be our game plan, whether that's pin pull, we're going to go stretch, we're going to go inside zone, we're going to go duo run plays, we're going to go gap scheme, right? We're going to go sweeps. They can be very flexible in terms of their run scheme because they have flexible athletes that can kind of handle it all. Jonah Jackson was here when we did both. Graham Glasgow, he was a great run blocker, especially as zone blocker. His ability to front side defensive tackles left and right. And then in the interior, yeah, you could add a backup behind Frank Ragnow. Don't have an issue with that. I think there's some really nice late round interior offensive line, by the way, in this draft, whether that be a Charles Turner, who I liked out of LSU. I think there's some nice late picks potentially in this draft for the interior offensive line. I've been going through a lot of offensive line recently, offensive tackles, just different guys I think can fill different positions, so we'll talk about that more. But I think there's some really nice offensive linemen in this draft, is my point, that can move a lot of different positions. But to me here, whether that's depth or starters, I think that you want to keep. You told me the Lions had Jonah Jackson, they didn't have Graham, and instead, let's just say KO started at guard. Would I look at that and be scared? Not really. I'm like, okay, we can get by with that. We can make that work. Do I want it over a 17-game season? Not really. If you told me both guards are out of the mix and say it's KO'd and, I don't know, Colby Sorstel or Michael Neeson KO'd, I'd be like, you know what? I don't think I love that. Now, they're hoping, again, Colby's going to take those steps. 6th-round pick. He's going to need a little bit of time. He's transitioning from right tackle to inside to play guard. And there's things that you like. He's another, again, very big zone scheme fit, very athletic offensive lineman. To me, one of those spots is interior offensive line where even if that's just re-signing the players, that's indeed. Now, if they re-sign both Jonah and Graham, I'm not saying, yo, you need to go get another guard. You could do it for depth if you want. I honestly kind of like the depth we have here. We just added Nitain Mutai. We also, again, another zone scheme fit, by the way, just throwing that out there. Farniok, I think I'm saying his name. I know I'm saying his name wrong, to be honest with you. Like I said, Michael Neese. You also have KO, who's an exclusive rights free agent. He should be back. He stepped in, did some good things for us. And Colby Sorstel. Like, I actually kind of like the depth if I know those two are my starters. And even if not, like, let's say the Lions brought back Jonah but not Graham, and then you got to the draft. That doesn't mean, like, okay, you have to make that your top pick. You know, KO could start, Colby could start, but I'd still want to add something to that. However, if the Lions were sitting there in their first round and say, I don't know, a guy like Powers Johnson was available out of Oregon, would I sit back and be like, don't do it? I'd be like, I wouldn't hate that. I really like the player. He's a freaky athlete. Okay, put him in the mix there. We'll put him at guard, even though he's a center. That guy will eat there. He's played some guard, I believe, as well in the past. So, like, this is one of those can really fluctuate. It just depends on what we do with our own guys. I think they both get re-signed. I would love to bring them both back. But, again, Jonah Jackson, to me, he just has limitations. He's very flexible, run diverse. That's his biggest asset to me. Pass pro, it's just solid. It's not great, but it's solid. So, you're going to have some weaknesses there. Flip side, you're hoping he develops. Graham Glasgow, not a great pass protector, pretty average. However, he was a really good zone blocking run blocker, and he brought a lot of flexibility for us out in space. So I'd like to bring him back, 1-year deal, not super expensive. Then I can even draft someone on top of that if I wanted to. That is number 2. At number 1, we have offensive tackle. That is right, man. I've been saying this for years. Offensive tackle is terrible. We need to replace Sewell and Decker. No, I'm playing. Did I get? No, I don't think I got nobody. All right, number 1 is outside cornerback. I think this one's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand for me. Again, it's not me saying this has to be our top draft pick or the biggest free agent signing. I don't think the Lions need to do that. And actually, I went through the last, 5 Super Bowl winners, and you see a lot of those teams, man, they had really good cornerback rooms. They didn't always spend a ton outside of really the LA Rams back when they won their Super Bowl with Jalen Ramsey. They had Jordan Fuller in that mix, too. They also had Darius Williams. It was mainly Jalen Ramsey that was taking up the cap. But a lot of these teams, Rams draft picks plus trade, safety and corner, you could throw that into the mix too. A lot of the last 5 Super Bowl winners, we saw Kansas City now twice, young players, right? Josh Williams, late round pick, Fayetteville State. You also have Trent McDuffie, earlier pick. You have a mid-round pick in L'Jarius Sneed, built through kind of the draft there. You can go back a little bit. Tampa Bay, Carlton Davis, the young safety back in the day had, very young, built through the draft. This is a position that the Lions honestly haven't really addressed in the draft. I mean, they have a kind of a little bit, like Jerry Jacobs was an undrafted free agent. Chase Lucas was a 7th-round pick. You also went out and you drafted Iffy, but he's now playing safety, which is why the safety isn't on this list because of a guy like that. So for me, this one is just clear-cut top need for me. We just need an outside cornerback. Now, with that, here's the biggest explanation. It's just as simple. If the Lions were to bring back every single free agent set to hit free agency this year at this position, this would still be a need. If they brought back Jerry, Kendall Vilder, they brought back Will Harris, it would still be a need for the Lions. They have Sutton. He'll be here, 2-year deal. We'll see about next year because there's going to be potential outs there, but he'll be here next season. You have Brian Branch. He's a dog. You need someone opposite, especially in today. You just need another cornerback. The Lions need another cornerback. I think that they need, their type that they feel can be physical at the line of scrimmage. Of course, we added a defensive backs coach now to this mix, and I think that he's going to help a ton, specifically working with the cornerback position, as that's kind of his specialty. So go check out that video if you want to. So because of that, to me, the Lions just need an addition here. Doesn't have to be the top pick, doesn't have to be the biggest free agent signing. They need a new addition to this. Now, this could be as simple as, hey, maybe a guy like Mosley, bring him back for another year. I'd bring Mosley back. I have no issue with it, to be honest. Or maybe another deal like that, right? Like, okay, maybe kind of another prove-it deal. And then on top of that, we'll go in the draft and we'll add someone in round 3, right? We got 2 third-round picks. One of our third-round picks will be a cornerback. I wouldn't have a problem with that. One side of me, I really want to get a draft pick in the building. Like I want to get a solid draft pick in the building, not your last pick in the draft. I want to get a draft pick in the building that can grow and develop. Doesn't have to start. I just want to get one in the building that can grow within this cornerback room with Brian Branch. And then the opposite side is we still do need some help. So if it's not going to be very early, you're going to want to add a free agent addition that you feel like, if healthy, he can start on the outside. That's how I look at this. Now, I am not opposed to bringing back Vilder, Will Harris, or Jerry Jacobs at all. For me, I like Kendall Vilder. I understand, like, hey, people were not happy with it. His ball skills need big-time improvement, and that's a key factor. It's a key trait for a cornerback. He just may not be great in that area. I like how he covers. He tight and covered, stays in phase well, and he plays the run well. But he just doesn't make a lot of plays on the football. So that's a skill. It really is. I just got done watching Cooper DeJean a couple days ago, and I was like, yo, this guy's ball skills are insane. He's obviously got all the traits. I'm just missing some anticipation there. But I really like this dude. I have no issue bringing back any of those guys. I'd love to bring back Jerry. I think he'd be an awesome depth piece to have. Plus, he gets special teams impact. Will Harris, they still use him in goal line spots, a lot of outside flexibility. This position, though, is just, to me, clearly a need. If the Lions came in next year and they don't have to have a shutdown corner, right? They don't have to have that. But, you've heard rumblings like, hey, what about J.C. Horn from Carolina? I would love that. I'm a huge J.C. Horn fan. And to me, what would be awesome about that is you probably wouldn't give up a massive draft pick to get him because of where his contract's at. If he doesn't get the 5th year, where his contract's at, probably wouldn't take a huge draft pick. Plus, he won't be super expensive because he's still on the rookie deal. It'll be expensive, but it won't be super expensive. And on top of that, it would kind of play in just like signing a 1-year deal to a free agent. Instead, you're getting a very, very talented player that is incredible when he's out there. He changed that Carolina defense as soon as he came back, got healthy this last year, even though he only played 6 games. The downside is he just has injuries, so you have to work with that. so you wouldn't want to give up a massive draft pick. But if you did that, right, and then maybe you don't have to draft somebody, or maybe you still do draft somebody, to that mix just a little bit later in the draft. Like, to me, that position is the biggest need. The Lions need something opposite. We've seen it, whether that was getting Jerry Jacobs back a year ago, pairing him with Jeff, and it was like, oh, our defense is actually not completely awful. We are a lot better, and it was immediate. As soon as he got there, Green Bay, it was like, oh, we won the football game. Way better defensively. Finished productively, top in completion percentage, really good in pass rating allowed. Touchdown interception ratio was awesome. And it was like, okay, this defense is pretty good. Pass defense again this year, really good completion percentage, right? More interceptions, specifically the safety position was giving us those. We just need another cornerback that, to me, can really help Cam Sutton by playing opposite of Cam Sutton, and it'd be awesome to have a pure number one. There you go. I'm going to leave it there, man. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Give me your top 5 positional needs this offseason. I considered some others like tight end, but I couldn't go there because I think Shane Zilch is coming back, exclusive rights free agent. I like him. James was so good in pass protection, and obviously you have a guy like Sam Laporta, so I like what we have there, to be honest with you. That's really the only couple positions that I even really consider. Like I said, I felt pretty clear-cut about these. Quarterback's good, running back's good. I felt pretty clear-cut about these top 5.
Really, the biggest change about this list that I can make, and honestly my mind could change 20 minutes after uploading this, is dropping outside linebacker down, putting defensive tackle at very least above, if not more. We don't need a fullback. Look at Craig right here.
So leave it there. Thank you, Pride, for watching, and I'm out.